Hey everyone, welcome to our Asset Management Friday segment of the Passive Income Through Multifamily Real Estate podcast. I'm your co-host, Kyle Mitchell, also joined by Gary Lipsky. This is a new segment that we recently launched. It's focused on educating operators, building better systems, and becoming a best-in-class operator. Since we're also live on Facebook right now, make sure to type in any questions you have in the comment section below. Be sure to also check out our Facebook group, Passive Income Through Multifamily Real Estate. All right, today on the show, we have Matt Picheny. Matt, how's it going?
It's going great, Kyle. How are you?
Doing very well, thanks. Let's start by telling everyone a little bit more about yourself and what you currently do.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Matt, and I've been investing in real estate for, I guess around 18 years at this point, and started focusing on multifamily, really scaling my business about 4.5 years ago. Prior to that, it was something I did on the side. At this point, I'm invested in over 2,000 units throughout the United States. About 75% of that portfolio I'm a passive investor in, or limited partner. And then the other 25% are assets that I currently manage, either ones that I own on my own or ones that I'm the lead syndicator on.
Nice. Well, welcome, Matt. So today we want to go over, once you close and you own that apartment building, what happens? What does the next 30 to 60 days look like? Who are you connecting with? So let's jump in. What does that checklist look like for the next 30 to 60 days?
Yeah. So, as you were saying, Gary, I like to put together a list of 30, 60, and 90-day goals that I look to accomplish once I've closed on a property. And, it's really about, the type of investing that I'm doing. I'm looking for B and C class properties in great areas or improving areas where there's a value add component. So it's really about creating value right off the bat. A lot of the times when we're taking over a property, we're looking to sort of burn off a lot of that loss to lease. So you may have somebody who's been a resident of that community for maybe multiple years, and maybe they're a good tenant. They pay their bills on time. They don't cause a lot of problem, but because they've been there for such a long time, they've got what's called loss to lease, which is, let's say, rents are usually $800, but this person, when they started renting 10 years ago, was paying $500. They've kind of gotten inched up a little bit every time, but they're much, much below the market rate at that time. You kind of want to close that gap that might be there in the loss to lease. Now, I don't look to bring, the rents right up to the full market right away, but I want to close that gap. And sometimes you can get pushback from the tenants unless you can really show, that you're adding the value. And that's what I found, is that I've gone in, and usually in the first 30 days, I look for one thing that I can do that's going to be a nice big exterior improvement. Maybe that's redoing the parking lots, or redoing the sidewalks, or painting all the units, or some nice big item that I can do that's going to affect all the current residents of the property, so that they can see, hey, look, this new management, they're coming on board and they're actually putting money into the property. So I can kind of understand why my rent is being increased, because look at everything that they're doing. So that's, one of the things that I look to do, hopefully immediately upon closing. And then I look to, figure out what are the next things, and how does that work to try to, cure any deferred maintenance, work on those exterior upgrades. Those are kind of the first things that I'm looking to do, while I'm also working with vendors, trying to figure out what is that interior upgrade package going to look like for that particular property, and start planning those out, because those will take a little bit more time.
Nice. And in your past, is there one thing that's got the biggest bang for your buck on an exterior or a new amenity that you add to an apartment building?
I don't know that I have one particular thing that I really like to do versus others. I think each property has its own strengths and weaknesses, and so that's I need to treat each one differently.
So who else is part of this team that, you post-close? Who are the, besides the vendors, how often you were talking to the property management company? Are there other people part of this team as well?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think figuring out what that team's going to look like is something that happens right before close. So during the due diligence period, one of the mistakes that I made earlier on was just worrying about sort of getting to the closing table. And there's a lot of things that need to get done. I know you've had other people talking about that on the podcast. There's a number of things that need to get done. So I'm not trying to downplay that at all. It's a lot of work. But I used to not necessarily focus on, okay, how am I going to hit the ground running? And so then I would get through closing. Okay, now I'm done with closing. Now how do I assemble this team? What is this all going to look like? What I do now is once I get through the due diligence period, there's usually that time from once your due diligence is completed till the time you actually close on the property. You could have 30 to 60 days in there. And during that time, while there are a lot of other activities going on, I like to really formulate what is my plan going to be. And each property is different. What is, the things that I'm going to be able to do, and who are the different players in that. Go out and get different bids. When I'm looking at a property and I'm analyzing a property, or even when I'm first starting the due diligence, I might only get a bid for roof repairs, let's say, from one vendor, a vendor that I know, that I trust, that hopefully I've worked with in the past. So I have a good ballpark of what it's going to be, but then I like to triple bid everything that I do. So during that time, I get the chance to kind of do that, get all the contracts in place, and sort of get all my, everything lined up and ready to execute. So right at closing, you can just move forward.
Nice. Yeah, I see a lot of apartment buildings close, and they don't have that. They're working on that plan just after they close. And Kyle and I are like amazed that we're off and running. We're working on things a month or two before we close, just so that we can get rolling. What are you using to track all of this? Is it like Word, Excel, expensive software that you recommend, or?
Yeah, I think there's some great software out there. I have a project management background. That's what I did in my corporate life. I was a professional project manager. I'm even certified to do that. And there's great programs like Basecamp out there that's wonderful. Slack is a really cool tool to use. There's one called Asana that I've heard of that a lot of people like. But what I found is those tools are only good. They're only as good as the input that's going into them. And if all of your team members aren't on board and familiar with that software, it doesn't really work very well. It's not the software's fault. It's just the team has to all be on board and behind this effort. So what I've actually found that's worked really well for me, I just use Excel. I'm kind of an Excel junkie, and I've learned how to do a lot of different things in Excel with conditional formatting and drop down lists, all kinds of different things that I can do to sort of automate the work that's done in Excel. I have a background before the project management stuff in some very basic computer programming. So I kind of a little bit of a nerd at heart and kind of enjoy figuring out how to automate some of that stuff. But Excel is something that everybody knows how to use. And, we've just mandated that people are going to use that. And I have a dashboard that I've created over time from my professional project management background, and then tailored that and added to it for the real estate business and the asset management. So we use that as the main tool, this weekly dashboard that my project management team's working on, my property management team's working on, me as the asset manager I'm working on. We have weekly calls and we go through all the tabs in the dashboard. Obviously certain things are highlighted that we'll look at and we'll bring to attention. Other things we're just kind of keeping in there for archival purposes. That's been the tool that I've chosen to use.
Nice. And so when you're having these calls with your property manager, what are the two, critical pieces that you guys are going through on your dashboard?
Yeah, well, I have, there's essentially 4 tabs on the dashboard. I'm thinking about making sure And so the first one is our status. I call it a stoplight status, where people can choose depending on the drop down, what you choose, if it's critical or not, it'll either be red, yellow, or green, right? So green items you don't need to work on. Yellow, okay. Red, this is a critical thing that's needs to be addressed immediately. So we go through the stoplight status first. Then the next thing, we have we have a KPIs. That's really important. The KPIs are the different key performance indicators, KPIs, that we're looking at. So that's, how many move-ins have we had, how many move-outs, how many renewals, how many work orders are out there, how many vacant units do we have, how many upgrades have we done, how many are on notice, how many are pre-leased, all that kind of information is on that KPIs tab. Then I have a lease trade-outs tab, which just shows us existing renewals, new leases, and vacant units, and sort of what they were and where they're going, to make sure we're going to hit the numbers that we've projected. And then I have a leasing tab. In my leasing tab, we track every single lead that comes in, and we track the source of each of those leads and the status of where they are, whether they're active or inactive, whether they've leased or not. And therefore, on that tab, I have a way of going through some formulas I've put in there and actually let us know which sources are bringing us the most leads, and also the percentage of those leads that are actually converting. You might get 1,000 leads from Craigslist, but then nobody actually rents a unit. Is it really worth spending your time on Craigslist? Maybe you're better off on apartments.com or whatever the other source is. So for us to be able to actually track that and see which ones are bringing in the leads and which leads are converting. And then I have an additional tab at the end, a renewals tab, where I just keep track of all of the units in the property and what they've renewed. We're usually going 60 to 90 days out on our renewals, so we can sort of see, all right, what is that inventory going to look like in the future? But also look, what has our retention rate been? Are we seeing massive turnover at the property? And if so, why is that happening? I like to see around a third of the property, I think, is kind of that industry standard. You're going to have about a third of your property turnover every particular and in any given year. So, if you're not having that, maybe you're doing really well. But if people are leaving your property in droves, what's happening there? Is that on purpose? Are you turning over that tenant base, getting a different caliber of tenant in there, or is there a problem?
Yeah, really, really good insight. Thanks. I'm going to pass it over to Kyle to wrap it up.
All right. The same question we ask every guest. What is your asset management superpower?
Attention to detail. I'm kind of really into details. I learned that years ago when I used to work in web development. I had a creative director who had me put something together, and I built out the web page she had designed, did a Photoshop design. And I think anyone, Kyle, you or myself or Gary, like any of us were to look at this, you would look at the Photoshop design and then what was on the screen, and you'd say, yeah, it's perfect. It's exactly the same. She's like, no, this line is off by 1 pixel here. This mark over here is off by 3 pixels there. And I was like, what? But she was right. She put she took a screenshot and did an overlay. And I worked with that woman for about 5 years. And I think through working with her, it just sort of trained my mind to look at the details. Later on in my career, a lot of the people who would work for me, I just used to pick things out all the time, and they used to call me Eagle Eye. And so I kind of have that really laser focused attention to detail. And it might be annoying to some people, but it's also a superpower.
Matt, I can relate on that. My attention to detail is one of my superpowers as well. And I know some people do get annoyed by it, but you know what? Whatever. It's definitely a solid superpower. So, all right, Matt. Well, thanks for coming on the show, adding value on the subject of post-close. Today, I learned a couple things. Create a 30, 60, 90-day plan. Each property is different, so they're going to need a different plan. And then the one I love the most is post-close starts pre-close. And that's like Gary mentioned, we start 30, 60 days ahead of closing to set up our post-close game plan. So tell the listeners where they can find out more about you.
Oh, yeah. You can go to my website. It's mjppg.com, or you can email me directly at Matt, M-A-T-T, at mjppg.com. I love chatting with people, wherever you are in your real estate journey. So feel free to reach out.
Perfect. All right. Thanks for everyone listening in. If you like the episode, again, please head over to iTunes or Stitcher. Give us a like, subscribe, and review so we can continue to grow this podcast. We'll talk to everyone next week.